Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Dungeons and Dragons. It was written and directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. It's starring Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Ray-Jean Page, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, Hugh Grant, and Chloe Coleman. Also Daisy Head, I'll throw her in there too. If you haven't seen the trailers, you might not know exactly why people are actually excited about this movie, because you're thinking, oh, it's another one of these based on another property movies that's going to be really bad. It's not a video game movie, but it's a board game movie, and you know, we don't have as many of those as we do video game movies, but they're also still rarely good. There's obvious exceptions, like Clue being a great movie. Clue is amazing, but I mean, mainly you think of, at least I do think of movies like Battleship, you know, where it's like, there's not enough plot here to turn into a movie. What are you doing? And even if there is a plot, like a video game that's got a decent plot, it usually ends up badly adapted and therefore being a horrible movie. But this movie is adapting the source material, but also doing it in a comedic way, doing it like, this is a role-play game, let's throw in some humor of what it's like to actually play the role-play game. I think people have probably overhyped a little bit how much they do that, but there's still definitely some of that humor in there. It's also, when it's in there, it's subtle enough that if you've never played the game, you might not pick up on all of it. It just kind of flows like normal humor or a normal story, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it should be all in your face and obnoxious. Yeah, so what did I think of this movie? I enjoyed it. There was a lot of things that were really good about it, mainly being the humor. The humor, I'll say, is mostly good. There's some of it where it's kind of like Marvel-esque. This movie in general felt like old school Marvel, MCU, I should say, not old Marvel. Like, this is post Iron Man, a little bit later, like the Avengers. This felt kind of like the Avengers, or a lot of people are going to be comparing it to, I know, Guardians of the Galaxy, because it's the same basic thing. You've got a ragtag group of thieves and criminals all coming together to do something good. That's what this is, but instead of space and you know, superheroes, this is fantasy and magic. It's the same basic thing, just put into a different situation, and so I think a lot of people are going to like it for that. Some people may think it's a little too similar, but I didn't feel that way. I thought that it stood alone as its own unique thing. There were other things about it too that made me actually kind of like this more than Guardians of the Galaxy. One thing that stood out to me being the cinematography is way too good. Like, especially early on, there's a lot of these shots in there that I'm like, why are we putting so much effort into a Dungeons and Dragons movie? Like, there's really good, really unique, really thoughtful cinematography. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the camera work in that. I enjoyed the acting. I will say Chris Pine was very good. Not all of the acting is good. I should point out Michelle Rodriguez is Michelle Rodriguez. If you've seen her in Fast and Furious or like Resident Evil, you know what she is. She's not a high class actress, but I think that kind of works with this. I don't know if it was intentional, because if you've ever played it, you're all voicing your own characters, you're all just, you know, playing a game together. And so it kind of, to me, it felt like all of the different actors were kind of acting in a different style than each other, which I doubt that was on purpose, but if you go into it with that mindset, then it kind of makes it entertaining in that way. But regardless, it's like Chris Pine is playing very much just, you know, the same kind of role Chris Pine plays in everything, which I enjoy. I think he's good at it. And then you've got like Hugh Grant doing this very over the top, like this is a B-movie type acting, and that works for his role. So everybody's kind of approaching it slightly differently, which to me, like I said, if you think of it like, oh, we're playing the game, we're seeing the game being played out, that makes it entertaining. And I think that applies to the whole movie. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that you kind of would roll your eyes at normally, but if you view it through the lens of, oh, we're playing the game and you rolled a 20 or you rolled a 1, and that's what happened because of it. Like, there's a scene where I think some people just viewing it as just a movie will be annoyed by, like, oh, well, the female characters is really strong, really good at everything kind of character, and then the main character who's a guy is a moron. And it's like, we've seen a lot of that But if you watch the scene where it's like they're trying to attack these guards, and the whole time she's taking on everybody, and Chris Pine can't even get his handcuffs off. So it's like she's rolling 20s, he's rolling 1s and 2s. Then it kind of becomes funny because you're thinking about it that way. So I think that's kind of more of what they were going for, rather than playing into that annoying stereotype that we've been doing a lot. So if you just view it through that lens, it becomes a lot more entertaining, and a lot of the movie works that way as well. I will say, as much as I enjoyed the humor and the story, I will say the first half to me felt dramatically better than the second half. I remember around the halfway point was when the first joke didn't land for me. Like, there was a character who just doesn't understand expressions. Like, there was somebody who said, oh, he's a son of a bitch, and the guy's like, so you blame his mother? And I was like, no, it's an expression. He's like, I don't understand those. And I was like, that was the first time during the movie where I was like, okay, that joke didn't land. And then some of the humor is also just really predictable. Like, there's this one character who says, I can't watch you die, so I'm gonna leave the room. And it's like, I knew exactly word for word what he was going to say before he said it. Not necessarily a bad joke, like I still kind of chuckled at it, but it's like you knew exactly where that was going before it happened. So there's a lot of predictability, a lot of obvious roll your eyes stuff in the second half. The first half is really good. Like, I don't think I have any complaints at all about the first half. The first half exceeded my expectations, which are already moderately high coming into this. I know, surprisingly, based on what a lot of people kind of expected a Dungeons and Dragons movie to be, but I had moderately high expectations, and the first half was so much fun. Like I said, the cinematography was great, the humor was great, even the action and the fantasy elements. I mean, like, we haven't had a good fantasy movie since like Harry Potter, and not even like the last couple, because I didn't even love those. So like, to me, this was maybe the best fantasy movie we've had since Harry Potter, which is a crazy thing to say, but fantasy just hasn't been good for a while. But anyway, like, there's scenes where you've got this shapeshifter who's being chased, and so you see her change shapes to try to get around and hide and get out, and I was like, that was fascinating to watch. I thought it was a really well shot, directed, written scene. I thought everything about that was so well laid out. So there's a lot of stuff, especially like I said in the first half, that exceeded my expectations. I'm like, I'm laughing a lot, I'm enjoying these characters, I even enjoyed the backstory that they were giving. Like, the exposition didn't bother me. Cinematography, there's a lot of practical effects. They do use a lot of CGI, but like, there's a lot of costume work, and they're in actual sets, by the way, which is something that you can say this is better than Marvel with. It's like they're inside of this castle room, and I'm like, that's a real room, oh my god. And maybe I shouldn't be impressed by that, but like, nowadays I am. They went above and beyond. Like, they didn't have to do that. They could have just filmed in front of a green screen, it would have been cheaper. They didn't have to do practical effects, but they wanted to, and they did. They didn't have to, you know, have this great cinematography, but they did. Like, early on in the movie, like first or second scene, they've got this exposition about, you know, their life as thieves and becoming a thief and why they did it. And there's this shot of them stealing jewelry for the first time, and you've got this shot, like these angles of jewelry up in a store, and with slow-mo of like the shattering glass bouncing off of the jewelry, glinting in the light. I'm like, oh my god, what are we doing? This is amazing. So I will say this movie for the first half wholly exceeded my expectations. And I keep referring to the first half because the second half, although not bad, wasn't great. During the first half, I was willing to give this movie like a 7.5, and now I'm more at like a 6.5, because the second half just really started to fall flat for me, which is unfortunate. But it's like the humor didn't work as well in the second half. There was still some funny jokes, but I was like, there was more and more jokes that were like obvious rip-off jokes, like I said, with like the I can't, you know, see you die, so I'm gonna leave the room, which was so predictable. And then there was a scene where it's like they basically just took the shot of Hulk beating up Loki from the Avengers, and they just did that in this, and it's like, okay, I've seen that before too. And then the action started to drop. The cinematography wasn't as interesting in the second half. Like, I don't remember any memorable shots in the second half. And the ending was, the ending just needed a severe rewrite. Like, nothing about it was satisfying or made any sense. And I won't get into spoilers right now, maybe I will in a few minutes, but like, that was just frustrating. Now, there was still some really good, interesting plot points going on. Like, I will say they used imaginative ways to do things, and I enjoyed that. Like, there's this whole thing with, like, a portal gun, essentially. I loved everything they did with it. It was so much fun, and that was all in the second half of the movie. But it kind of started to lose steam in the second half. So I still definitely recommend the movie, but the first half is so much better than the second half, which is unfortunate. I recommend it. You may be a little bit disappointed with the second half because the first half raises your expectations and then the second half kind of lets it down. But still recommend it. Like I said, probably at a 6.5 with it. So not like the best movie ever, but you know, totally okay, totally serviceable, especially for like a Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I don't think anybody expected to be good at all. Like I said, it's basically Guardians of the Galaxy with fantasy elements, you know, in olden times, or, well, never happened, you know, but like an old-timey setting with more traditional fantasy elements. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. I am going to get into spoilers now, so stick around if you've seen it. If you haven't, please go watch it first and then come back and we can talk about it then. Thanks, guys. Bye. So, spoilers. So the main crux of this story is in the exposition at the beginning. You see that Chris Pine's wife was killed, and so now he's trying to get this magic device that can bring her back to life. It can bring people back to life, the reawakening stone or something like that. And they spend this whole time trying to get it, and then they finally do get it at the end. But right at the end, Holga, which is the Michelle Rodriguez's character, dies during battle, which you don't see happen. You know, they're doing this fight scene with the main bad guy witch, even though she's like subservient to this other witch, but we only see him one time and he never comes back. And I was like, this is where the plot just started falling apart really rapidly. And so they're doing this fight thing, and she does this time stop thing. And she thinks she's about to stab Chris Pine, but then like, oh, we were faking it. We actually counted your time stop so we could put this magic canceling handcuff on you. Which was like, all right, that was contrived, but sure. You needed some way to beat this OP boss because she was a million times more powerful than you. So you kind of need to do something stupid. You need to roll a nat 20 here just to skate by. So, okay. But then they cut to Michelle Rodriguez is stabbed and dead now and dying, and it's like, when did that happen? Did I miss something? Was there a scene cut? What is going on? It was just so jarring to be like, oh, and she's dying now. And you're like, what? It's supposed to be sad and emotional because she's dying, but you're like, we have the reawakening thing. Just use it. And then Chris Pine looks at his daughter and goes, I can only use it once. I'm like, since when? Has that been a rule this whole time? I didn't know. If they said it, I completely missed it. So they didn't make it very obvious if they did. That's kind of frustrating. So you're like, oh, okay, cool. And so earlier in the movie, they have a couple flashbacks to the wife, which are really good. Like, they really make you care about her because there's great chemistry there. There's really good writing with that. And at one point, there's this scene where there's a dragonfly in their house, and they're kind of hiding from it at first. And then Chris Pine's like, all right, I'll take care of it. I'll kill it. And then she goes, no, don't kill it. You have to learn to let it go. And she opens the window and it flies out. And you're like, okay, that's going to come back because this whole time is about trying to get her back, but you should just learn to let her go. Okay, cool. So we're going to learn to not use this reawakening thing on her. But then at the end, it becomes a choice of, well, who am I going to use it on? I'll use it on Michelle Rodriguez. Why? Because I have memories of her with my daughter, I guess. The thought is I'm being selfless. My daughter never really met her mom / my wife, so it would mean more to her to get her more real mother, the one who really raised her, Holga, back. But it's so contrived, and it's not, that didn't work for me at all. And so then after that happens, I'm like, the only way that this could feel right is if, like, at the very end, they're like, all right, we're moving on. It's, okay, we're all okay now. And then I was really expecting them to be like, oh, but I've heard of this other way to raise somebody from the dead. Kind of like a Pirates of the Caribbean 2 ending, where it's like, haha, we're gonna go, save him this way. And it's like, and then that would be like, all right, let's do it. Cut to, title card credits. That's what I was expecting. And then they didn't. And I was like, well, that's lame then. Like, I don't know. We spent this whole movie going for this thing, and then we're not doing it, which I get it. It's like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey along the way. Okay, but I don't care anymore then. Like, I really lack any desire to rewatch this movie because of that now. And, Michelle Rodriguez is also like this warrior type who cares about, like, she would have wanted to die in battle. She even said that. She's like, I'm proud of what I did here. I'm proud of the way I'm dying. And then when they bring her back, she goes, why did you do that? And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. She was fine dying that way because, it was honorable. And that's the kind of character she is. She wanted to die an honorable way, and I get it. She was probably happier in the end to be alive. But I don't know. It's like, I just didn't like the ending. It just didn't really work at all for me. Anticlimactic from the villain side, because like we've got this cool, really badass villain and her supposed master. We never see the master again. Nothing comes of that, and maybe he's dead and that was some vision or something, but they don't say that. He's just this creepy guy in the shadows in one scene. And then another flashback, and then she just has such a lame end, a lame demise, that you're like, okay, that's just disappointing. So yeah, this movie really started out really, really good, and then stumbled to the finish for me. And it's not like it's a bad movie. Like, I'd still give it a 6.5, but it's just frustrating when a movie starts better than it ends, because it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. If like this movie started at, a 6 and then worked its way up to a 7.5, then I'd be like, okay, I can rewatch that because I can just get through the sluggish beginning to the good stuff. But now it's like, if I want to rewatch it, I'd be watching it and be like, okay, and turn it off halfway through. Maybe I'll catch the first hour on TV or something, so that's just disappointing. Like I said, the comedy also starts to like lose traction. It's got that very much like a comedy with a plot vibe, where they stop really focusing on the comedy at a certain point so that they can get to the plot. And that only works when the plot's good. And the plot in that moment was no longer great. I mean, there was some cool stuff. Like, they've got this strategy to get into the vault that they're trying to get into, where this thing is. And so they've got this portal gun, like I said, so they put one portal onto this painting, cover it with the tapestry, and then sneak that in there, give it to the people that are putting their treasure into the vault, and then put another portal onto a table so they can go through the table and come out of the tapestry. But then the painting has fallen over on its front, so then, the shapeshifter has to kind of dig a little crease into the concrete floor that it's stuck into, and then turn into a worm, wiggle under, and then expand out. Which I don't entirely know why you couldn't, if the portal's right there, why couldn't you just like reach through and just wedge and lift up the painting? It's not heavy, but it's still cool. It's imaginative. And there was some cool stuff with, they're put into this labyrinth with a monster. The monster is kind of lame, but there's still some cool imagery with that. I wish they'd spent more time and energy on it. That's the thing, where it's like, there was so much cool in this movie, but we really didn't get to focus on any of it. There's a lot of just hinted at backstory and hinted at world building, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's better to just hint at stuff than fully show it, because then your imagination can run wild. But when it's the only thing that's on display, like this whole labyrinth thing and the games and stuff, then you want a little bit more meat to it. It kind of just feels like fluff. So, like I said, I enjoyed it. I really did. As much as the second half has a lot of criticism that can be thrown at it, which I am doing, it's still worth a watch. Like, I will still, tell some people that I think will enjoy it to watch it. I will tell them. Maybe I won't suggest seeing it in theaters, but I will say, hey, you should probably watch this. You'll enjoy it, especially if you've played the game, because I think then you'll get much more out of it that way. So, yeah, that's what I did think. I know it's kind of here or there with it, but that's kind of what this movie was. It's a mixed bag, but mostly good. It is mostly good. The humor mostly lands. The cinematography is mostly good. The special effects are mostly good. The plot even is mostly good. It's just that ending that's kind of just, I wish there was more. But anyway, like I said, that's what I think. Thanks for watching, guys. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share. If you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.